Right. In today's session, we'll start with the normalization, which is one of the key techniques we use in relational data modeling. Now, why we have to go through the normalization process is to, make our relations in good relations, because many of the time people can start creating tables without going through the developing the conceptual model in ER and then mapping it. But then the final check should be that whether they are normalized relation. So that is what we are going to discuss under this. So there are various different normalization forms. That means these are known as formal concepts of dependencies, functional dependencies. I'll discuss what this is. So we are going to discuss things called functional dependencies, multi-value dependencies, and joint dependencies. So based on these ideas, we can talk about 5 different normal forms. But normally the industry standard is if you can come up to third normal form, that would be enough. So what it means when you are developing a database system, make sure that your relations are at least adhere to third normal form. Okay, so now let's look at what these different normal forms are. But before that, let me briefly discuss some ideas of dependencies. Now remember that functional dependency means, right, when you take a particular value in a column and then there'll be a relation, if there's a relation between that particular column with other. So when you compare two columns, if you have the same values, then we can say they are functionally dependent. Now let me take this with example. Now let's say you have given some registration numbers. It's unique, right? If it is unique, every time when you have your registration number, and if you take the name column, your name is there, right? If there are two instances, two records with the same registration number, ideally the names should also be same. So we can say that name is functionally dependent on your registration number. Similarly, now think about you have registration number and you have, let's say, passport number. If you think about that, every time when you have your registration number, you have your passport number. So they are functionally determined. So when you say that attribute X functionally determines set of attribute Y, that means X can determine unique value for Y every time. So when you see the same set of values in X in different rows, and if you get the same values, again, same values for the different rows for Y as well, then we can functionally determine this one. So mathematically, we can represent like this. So we can say X, we can say arrow saying Y, which means that two tuples, meaning records, two records, if you have same value for X, then you should have same values for Y. So it's like X is like your registration number, Y is like your name. So every time in a database or in a relation, if you see your registration number, and if you're seeing the same name, that means this is a functional dependency. So mathematically, we can write this as R of R, which means we are taking a particular instance. So we are taking two different tuples. So T1 and T2 means tuples, meaning the same as records. So if you're taking a particular variable X, and if you see that these two tuples are the same, then it should be same for Y as well. So in that particular case, we can say that you can, for example, Y can be functionally determined by X, right? So that's what we are going to learn, right, when we work with the normal forms. So here are some examples. Social security numbers and employee names. It's like your registration number or identity card number and your name. Similarly, project number and then the project name and location. So if you have a project numbers and using this, you can determine both project name and locations. So every time you see the same project number in two different rows, you will see the same name and the same location for this. So then what that means, project name and project location can be functionally determined by the project number. Similarly, this is actually coming from our company database. If you take both social security number, that is like our ID number, and project number together, you can functionally determine the number of hours particular employee works on the project. So these are some examples for functional dependencies. So in simple terms, if you take two records, we call tuples, and if you take a particular attribute, if you see the same values, at the same time, if you say the same value for another attribute, then those two attributes are functionally dependent. So that's what the basic definition for functional dependency. Now, why we need this information? So I will explain that when we discuss about the different normal forms. This is useful. Okay, now let's try to understand the normalization we discussed. There are different normal forms. So let's start with the first normal form. Right, now to adhere to the first normal form, you have to make sure that there are no composite attributes. What do you mean by composite? For example, if you take our name, we have two parts, first name, last name. If you take address, we have at least street number, city, and so on. So we have multiple parts. So having multiple parts in the rows are disallowed here. So let's say you have multi-valued attribute. Multi-valued attribute means that you have multiple values. For example, color of a car. Nowadays, you have multi-value. Let's say we have black and white. So you cannot have the both values in the same place. That's what it means, right? So first normal forms disallow composite attributes, multi-valued attributes, and any nested relations. When you have nested relations, relation after the relation, and attributes whose value for individual tuple are non-atomic. So considered to be part of the definition of a relation. So what it means, when you take a piece of data in the row in a particular cell, it should be atomic value. You have to have a just single value. Right. Now, let me give an example. Now look at this relation. This is how graphically we represent. So this is a department relation. We have four attributes: department name, department number, department manager, social security number, and department locations. So this is a primary key we have underlined. And we know that if you have a primary key, using the primary key, you can functionally determine all the other values. So this is possible. So if you know the department number, you can figure it out the department name. And when you have the same department number, you will have the same department name. So that's the arrow means. From this, you can functionally determine department name, department manager, social security number, and department location. But department locations, we have multiple values. So if you consider this one, research department, the department number is 5. And here is the manager social security number. And there are 3 locations. This is not in first normal form. So this is multi-valued attribute. So this is not allowed in the first normal form. So therefore, if you given this information, so what it means, department is not in first normal form. So to break this, you have to have unique values. So what do you mean by unique values? Each of these values should be in separate tuples, separate records. So therefore, you have to break this. So you can notice here we have 3 values. They are break into atomic values. That means you have to repeat these values. So to make it a unique, now you will see, you have to create a primary key by combining department number and department location together, because you cannot take department number alone, because then you have repeated values. It should be unique. So therefore, you have to combine both department number and department location. Now, this relation, we can say this is in first normal form. So this is the whole process. First, you look at a relation and see whether which normal form is in. Right now, in this particular case, this is in zeroth normal form. To make it a first normal form, we break this multi-valued attribute. We make it to 3, and then we repeated other values. We have combined both department number and department location, and then we define the primary key. Now it's unique, and that follows the first normal form. Right. Let me give you another example. In this particular example, what you notice is you will have multiple values for project number and the number of hours particular person works for a project. So you cannot have such a situation. That means you have multiple values within the cell. So because this is one row, and in this particular case, you will see you have 2 project numbers and 2 working hours. So when you have a situation like this, also, this is not in first normal form. So therefore, you have to break this. When the relations are not in the normal forms, you have to break it. So in this particular case, you have to break, right? This issue, that means this should be separated out and this should be separated out. So when you separate out social security number and employee name, so we will give you a new relation name, and this is the primary key. Now, when you are remove this, make sure that you have to make the connections. Therefore, you have to combine social security number, project number, and number of hours. So therefore, you can see when you break this into 2, this part will go away, but you should make sure that it should be combined and you get this back. So for that, you have to have the social security number. So when you have social security number, project number, and number of hours particular employee works for a project, you have to combine both social security number and the project number. So once you combine these 2, then you will have a relation where it is belongs to first normal form. This part. Now, in the second normal form, so before you go to second normal form, you have to make assumption. The assumption is we now assume that your relations are in first normal form. That means in the relations you have atomic values, right? No multi-valued attributes, no nested relations, right? So therefore, when you are going to check for the second normal form, make sure that your relations are in the first normal form. Now, here onwards, we are going to consider the concept of functional dependencies. What is functional dependency? We discussed that when you have unique values in one particular attribute, and if you see the same unique values for the other columns, then we can functionally determine one from the another, right? In this particular case, second normal form, we talk about primary key definitions, right? So the concept that we are trying to predict here is called fully functional dependency, right? Now, let me explain what this means, right? So when you have more than one attribute in a primary key, let me repeat one more time. When you have more than one attribute in the primary key. Okay, if you go back in our previous one, you will see the situations like this. For example, here we have one attribute in the primary key. Here we have 2 attributes for the primary key, right? So this is, we consider when you have more than one. When more than one attributes when forms the primary key, right? Then any attribute which is not belongs to a primary key or candidate keys, it should be fully depend on the primary key. We call fully functional dependence. What I mean by this is, now given this situation, what this relation means, what this means, using both social security number and project number, we can determine the number of hours, which means you cannot or you should not be able to functionally determine the number of hours using only social name, social security, or only project number, right? That's why it says neither social security number number of hours or the project number to the number of hours. So this is only determined by both of these attributes. Then we call it's a fully functional dependent. Now, let's take the second example. We have social security number and project number. Using those, you are going to determine the employee name. Now, look at individually. Can you identify given the social security number, identify the employee name? Yes, it's possible because this is unique. So therefore, this is not full functional dependency. This is called partial dependence because employee name can be derived only using the social security number. Therefore, when you have a relation, right? So we can extend our definition. What do you mean by this? When you have a relation R, it's in the second normal form if every non-prime attribute. What I mean by non-prime. Now, you can have more than one candidate keys. What do you mean by candidate keys? You can have unique attribute sets, more than one in your relation. They are always probable, and then you are taking only one of them as a primary key. Let me give an example. Now think about your identity card number, passport number, driving license number. All are unique ones, right? But when you're creating a relation, you are taking only one of them as a primary key. So then others are known as prime attributes. So non-prime means any attribute which are not belong to candidate keys, right? They should be fully functional depend on the primary key. I will come to another example. So if it is not in that second normal form, then you should break it so that you are going to get the second normal form. Right. Okay. Let me explain this with an example. Now you can already identified, you can see, right? As the name says, you can see we have employee details as well as project details. Look at carefully the attribute set. Right. What do you think about this? So let's try to understand each and every attribute. We have social security number. It's like identity number. It's a unique one. Then we have a project number. Number of hours particular person works for project. Employee name, project location. Now we have also discussed earlier to identify the number of hours particular person works for the project, you need both. So that's why you have two lines here. Using both these attributes, you can functionally determine the number of hours. This is a graphical representation. This is the first functional dependency. Second one, look at the employee name. Employee name can be identified using only the social security number. This is second function dependency. Using social security number, you can functionally determine the employee name. Look at the third one. Using the project number, you can functionally determine the project name and project location. Right. So now I have a question for you. Now, given this relation, is it in the first normal form? Is it in the zeroth normal form? Yes. Now, given these set of attributes, and given that primary key is both social security number and project number, my question for you is it in the first normal form? So therefore, yes, thanks for your answers. We can say that this is in the first normal form. We cannot identify right now only with this whether we have multi-valued here. So therefore, we can assume that this is in the first normal form. Right, now the second question, why it is not in second normal form? Why this is not in the second normal form? Right, these are like attribute belong to the primary key. These are not belongs, right? So therefore, all these attributes should fully functional depend on the primary key. Fully functional means since you have two attributes, it should fully function depend on, it should function depend on both the attributes. So in this particular case, we have only one attribute, right? We have only one attribute, only fully functional depend on the primary key. So this is not, this is not, this is not. So except for this, right, these two are not fully functional dependent. So that means we can say it's partially dependent. If you take employee name, it's partially depend on the primary key. When you take project name, project location, it is partially depend on the project now. So therefore, this is not in second normal form. Okay, we need to break. So break these three. When you're breaking, okay, you can take this away and you can notice it's here. Function dependency 1, we break it. So we take both social security number and project number, and then number of hours particular employee works for the project. And the second one, second functional dependency breaks it. So you take social security number and employee name, and then social security number is the primary key. Third one, take the project number, project name, project location. Project number is the primary key. Now look at it. Okay, here is the only place we have two attributes in the primary key, and this is fully functional dependent. These are like, you don't have to even consider this. This is in the second normal form. So after this process, we can say all these three relations are in the second normal form. Right, good. Right, now let me give us some example. Give me an answer, right? So similar to this, you have to give me a answer for this. So the first exercise. So let's assume that we have a, let me take this student course. Let's assume that we have a student course relation. And let's assume that we have these relations. We have student ID, we have course ID, student name, let's say course title, and then instructor, and then grade, right? So let's say this is what we have, right? And let's assume that the primary key for this is both student ID and course ID, right? Now let's me give you functional dependencies. I'm going to give you the functional dependencies. These are the functional dependencies. First functional dependency, using both the student ID and then course ID. Yes, you can functionally determine grade. Second functional dependency, using student ID, you can functionally determine the student name. That is obvious, right? Third one, using course ID, you can functionally determine course title and instructor. Right. Now, tell me, right, in which relation this, in which normal form is this relation is in. Tell me whether it's in the 0th normal form or the first normal form. Then make sure that you decompose the relation into second normal form. Okay. Give me the answer in the chat. Right. Thanks for sharing your answers. First of all, a few things I want to discuss. Now, in this particular case, let me remove these lines. Now, I hope you understood the idea of functional dependency. So what this means is it will say that using both student ID and course ID, you can determine the grade. So this is our first functional dependency. Secondly, we say using student ID, we can determine the student name. Third, using course ID, we can determine course title and the instructor. So these are three functional dependencies. Now what we said is all the non-prime attributes. That means attributes are not part of the candidate keys. What are those attributes? These attributes should fully depend on the function dependency. So if you take this primary key, so this is fully functional dependent, but these are not. So therefore, we need to break this. How do you break this? Okay, so we can remove this. You can get student ID and student name, course ID and course title instructor, and then you will get student ID, course ID, and grade. So the three relations, we can say R1 for the simpleness. We can get SID, CID, and grade. This is one relation. Second relation, we can get SID and student name. Third relation, you can get CID, C title, and instructor. Make sure that you also indicate the primary keys. So in this particular case, primary key is these two. In this case, we have just one. Here also just one. So if you now look at all the non-prime attribute, they are fully functional depend on the primary keys. Right. So I'm assuming that now you have a good understanding about the second normal form. Right. Let's move to the next part. We have been discussing the second normal form. Right. Let me explain third normal form and I'll go back to the other examples. Now, in third normal form, we normally say that you disallow any transitive functional dependency. Transitive functional dependency means something like this. If you have a function dependency, let's say like this, X, we have arrow Y, which means Y can be function determined by X. But if you can find other attribute, let's say Z, and if you can go on like this, using X, you can function determine Z, and then using Z, you can functionally determine Y. So if you have a relations, if you have a dependency like this, we normally call this as transitive dependency. Right. Now let me show you an example. If you have social security number and department manager social security number, this can go through the department number, because from the department we can have social security number, and then manager social security number you can determine using the department number. So then we can say this is transitive dependency. But if you have social security number and employee name like this, it's non-transitive because you cannot find any attribute has this pattern. Right. So we can say a relation R in third normal form if it is in second normal form and no non-prime attributes are intransitive dependent on the primary key. And if it is the relation is not in third normal form, you can decompose into third normal form using third normal form normalization. Right. Now let me go back and show you a small example and we'll come back again to continue. Right. Now let's look at this example. The B example here. So we have the relation is called employee and department. We have employee name, social security number, birth date, address, department number, department name, and department manager social security number. And you can notice that this is the primary key. If this is the primary key, we know that using the primary key, we can function determine all the others. But at the same time, you can notice that using the department number, we can determine department name and department social security number. So I told you for using social security number, you can, because it's the primary key, you can determine any other. So what we are going to see the relation here is, right? So for example, if you take department name, right? So using social security number, you can functionally determine the department name. But in this particular case, we can do via the department number. So using social security number, we can identify the department number. And using department number, you can determine the department name. So this is what we have discussed. So if we have a situation like this, determining using social security number, determine the department name. If this is can be done through the department number, and from department number to department name, and this is called transitive dependency. So you can see in this particular case, we have a transitive dependency. So from here, going from here, we can go through the department number. So therefore, this is not in the third normal form. So when you have a transitive dependency, your relation is not in third normal form. So you need to break it. So in this particular case, you can break this part and this part separately. And now you have a social security number. Here we have department number, department name, department social security number. Remember to have this attribute, then only you can combine and get the previous one, right? And this particular case, right, there's no any violation, no transitive dependencies. Therefore, we can say the relation in third normal. Right. May I give you an example for this? Okay. Let's take this enrollment, right? Let's say we have this student ID. Let's say student name, course ID, course name, department ID, department name, grade. Right. Let's say this relation. Yes. Identify all the dependencies. Identify all the dependencies. And then decompose into third normal form. So given this relation, if you ask to identify the primary key, you have to combine both the student ID and the course ID together. Next question for you is, okay, identify the function dependencies. Yes. What are the functional dependencies? Right? What is the first one? Let's start with the easy one. Using student ID, we can functionally determine student name, right? Agree? Isn't it? Using student ID, we can determine student name. Okay, likewise, what are the other ones? Okay, given this enrollment relation, now we can identify 4 functional dependencies. So using student ID, we can functionally determine the student name. Using course ID, you can determine the name, as well as I have added department ID because usually you have a department involved in the offer in the course. Then using third one, department ID, you can determine the department name. And you need both student ID and course ID to determine the grade. Okay, now that you have identified the function dependencies, right? Now tell me in which form the relation is in. Is it in zeroth normal form, first normal form, second normal form, third normal form? Which one? So what I said was, right? We have, when you look at this, we have both student ID and the course ID. These are the attributes belongs to the primary key. So what are the dependencies we have? Using student ID, you can determine the student name. This is one dependency. Second one, using course ID, you can determine the course name and then department ID. I included both, assuming the department will offer the particular course. Third one, using department ID, you can determine the department name. Then we can get using both. This is the primary key, right? Using both, you can determine the grade. Actually, since this is the primary key, we should be able to function determine the department key as well. Department ID as well. Course name as well. Student name as well. Right? Because this is primary key. Right? But then you know that if you take this one, it is dependent only on one of the part of an attribute in the primary key. This is also one part. So because of this, let me draw in a different color. Because of these ones, this one, and because of this one, right? This relation not in second normal form. Why? It's partial dependency. So this is primary key, but these are dependent on partially, right? So therefore, these are partial dependencies. So we can say the relation is not in the second normal form. So it's in the first normal form. The correct answer for this is it's in the first normal form. Why? This is the primary key, and these two functional dependencies, this one and this one, it's partially dependent. So therefore, the relation is in first normal form. So now you have to break it. So how do you break it? So when you're breaking, you remove the functional dependencies. So what are the dependencies you remove? Okay, here are the values we have, right? So therefore, you remove the partial dependencies. You remove student ID and student name. So this is one relation. Let me say for the time being R1. Course name, department ID, and the course ID. So we can have another relation, course ID, course name, and the department ID. And actually this also comes here, department name as well. Then the third one is student ID and course ID. Right? Now you can see we break it to three relations. Right? So we break this into three relations. So what are the primary keys? So here's the primary key. Here's the primary key. Here's the primary key. Or the non-prime attribute fully function depend on. So because this is one, so you don't have to really worry about it. This is in the second normal form. This is also in the second normal form. This is also in the next second normal form. The grade is depend on both student ID and course ID. No issue. But now check for the third normal form. When you check for the third normal form, you have just one relation, right? You cannot find anything in between like this. Yes, you cannot find something like this. But if you carefully look at the relation R2, so what is the relation R2? You have course ID, course name, department ID, department name. Let me take it separately and show you. So I'm going to take it separately. Course ID, this is we call R2. And what is the primary key? It's a course ID. So using course ID, you can functionally determine course name and department ID and department name as well. But you know that using department ID, we can determine the department name. So this is not in third normal form, not in third normal form. Why? There's a transitive dependency. So using course ID, we can determine name and the department ID, but we can notice that using department ID, we can functionally determine the department. So this is a transitive dependency. So now we have to break in these two, right? So the final answer for this one is, so we have R1, student ID, student name, R3, student ID, course ID, grade, R4, student ID, student name, department ID, R5, we have department ID and department name. So the final answer for this one is, yes, we have R1, we have student ID, student name, then R3, we have student ID, course ID, and grade. Then R4, we have course ID, course name, department ID, R5, department ID, department. So these are the answers, the final answers. Given this, breaking down into second normal form and third normal form. Okay, so in this question, we can identify okay, using this, we should be function determine all the others. Yes, because this is primary key, right? But particularly this one, using both. So using both, we can function determine the quantity. Definitely should be there. So using both order ID and product ID, we can determine the quantity. So in this particular case, we can also notice using using product ID, we can determine the product name and maybe the supply ID as well. But using supply ID, we can identify the supply name. But because of this, we have partial dependency. Therefore, relation is not in second normal form. So you have to break this one first. So how do you break this? We can get order details. Let me say 1. I will get order ID and product ID and quantity. This is 1. So using this, we can determine the quantity. Using product ID, we can determine product name and supply ID. Using supply ID, we can determine supply name. So therefore, what I said was, we can break it. We can say order ID product ID and quantity. This is 1. Then we can have product ID, product name, supplier ID, supplier name. So this is the second one. So this particular case, these two are the primary key. And then this is fully function dependent and there's no transitive dependency. So therefore, immediately this will be in third normal form. But if you look at this one, now this one is product ID, right? You can determine product name, supply ID, and supply name. But of course, here we can notice there's supplier ID. Using this, we can function supplier name. So therefore, this is not in second normal form. So this is in third normal form. So you have to break this. Now, how do you break this? Okay, you have to separate this one. So I'm going to say order details. I will say 21 and 22. So we can have product ID, product name, supplier ID. This is one. And then I will say order details 22. What are the things we have? We have supplier 22. We have supplier ID and supplier name. So what are the primary keys? In this particular case, it will be a product, and this will be a supply ID. So no issues in this particular case. So therefore, both now in third normal form. Okay, so I hope now you have a good understanding about the second, first normal form, second normal form, and third normal form. Right. Now let's go back to the slides. So we discuss about second normal form and then yes, third normal forms as well. Right. Now let me discuss one more example. So we discuss second normal form and third normal form. Let me discuss one example. Okay, look at this example. Very similar to the previous ones, but you can notice. So here we have lots. You have property ID, country name, lot number, area, price, and tax rate. So this is a primary key, and therefore you can see all the others are function determined by this. And at the same time, you have another function dependency for, look at here. Using these two attributes, you can determine all the others. So this is called a candidate key. What I mean by this is using these two also, you can function determine the others, but you can take only one primary key, and that's why you taken them. So therefore, these attributes are called prime keys. None. Now, what I said was earlier, all the non-prime attributes should be fully depend on the primary keys or candidate keys. So then these three attributes should be fully dependent on the candidate keys. But if you look at here, tax rate is depend only a country name. So therefore, this is violating. This one is violating, right? Second normal form. Therefore, we need to break it. So how do you break it? Right? So you take country name and tax rate separate. So that's why you take these two. And these are the dependencies now you have. Now in this particular, this is okay, but in this particular case, you can see transitive dependency. You can see from these two, you can determine this one, but using this one, you can determine, then using this one, you can determine the price. So there's a transitive dependency. So you need to break this one as well. So break that one. And this is what you have. Right? So therefore, now I hope you got the complete understanding about the use of functional dependencies. Right. One last thing I want to discuss. So we discuss about the primary keys, but remember, you have to discuss about this for the multiple keys as well. And that's what we have observed in the second example I explained. Now, when you have like multiple keys, right? All the non-prime attributes. What do you mean by non-prime? All the attributes are not part of the primary keys. Then they should be fully function dependent on the key. That's the violation we have observed earlier. Right. Let's discuss the last one, which is called Boy's code normal form. So in Boy's code normal form, we talk about something called a super key, right? So super key means a set of attribute S of R that contains key of R. A relation in third normal form whenever you have this function dependency. And R, then you have a super key, or then it could be a prime attribute of R. So Boy's code normal form disallow the second condition, prime attribute. So let me explain with an example, right? So let's look at this example. In this particular case, we have a relation teach, and we have a student, course, and instructor, right? So what you can identify from here? So what are the functional dependencies you can identify? What are the function dependencies? It has given you a set of values. So using a set of values, you should be able to identify. Okay, let me explain. So in this particular case, you will see, think about the students course together, right? Look at the student and course. If you take together, it's unique, right? You can determine the instructor. So using these two, we can uniquely identify the instructor. So that means using both student and the course, we can functionally determine the instructor. On the other hand, if you look at the instructor, right, then you can determine the course. Notice if it is marks, then database, right? Navate, you have database, right? So in this particular case, using this, we can determine the course. So this is not allowed in Boy's code normal form. This is okay for the third normal form. You can see a cycle here. From these two, you can determine this one, and using instructor, you can determine this one. So if you have a pattern like this, it's disallowed. It is disallowed in Boy's code normal form. So how do you handle this? Right, that's what we are going to discuss now. So in this particular case, what we have observed here is, right, two function dependencies you can identify. Using both student course, you can functionally determine the instructor. Using the instructor, you can determine the course. So we can see student course is candidate key for this relation, right? That dependence is shown, the pattern of relation teach, but this is in third normal form, but not in Boyce code normal form. So therefore you have to break this. But the problem is when you're breaking this. So in this particular case, there are three possible ways of breaking this. So you can take student instructor and the student course instructor, course student, instructor course, and instructor students, right? We are breaking this to remove this, functional dependency. So all three decomposition will lose, but we have to settle for sacrifice a function dependency preservation. But we cannot sacrifice the non-additivity property of decomposition. So out of these, therefore, we have to select the last one. So you have to decompose the previous one as instructor course and instructor student, right? So this is what we call the Boyce code normal form. Right. Now with that, we conclude our session on normalization. Basically, normalization is a process that we follow when we want to realize or when we want to know whether our relations are good relations, right? So there are about like 5 normal forms, but normally at least your relation should be normalized up to third normal form. So under that, we discuss ideas like functional dependency, and we discuss the ideas of fully functional dependency and transitive functional dependency. And we did couple of exercises as well to understand the normalization. So with that, we finish our discussion on normalization and the relational model, the theory part. Now we'll discuss about the implementation details. So in this particular case, we will be using MySQL. So in this particular case, you can go to Apache Friends download and you can click on SAM download, which consists of the Apache server plus MariaDB or MySQL open source version. And then also dynamic programming languages like PHP and Perl. Once you download the SAM, you can actually set up and you can decide what you need to install. In this particular case, we need, let me share the whole screen. Right. So once you double click on the file, you can select what are the components that you need to install. Actually, you need only MySQL, so you can untick all the others, but there are some default things will be installed. So in this particular case, we are interested to learn MySQL only. So I selected only MySQL and click next. I already have some versions, so I will rename it. Otherwise, in your case, you don't have to do that. So this will be saved automatically in your hard drive. And then you click next, and it'll installed in your machine. So make sure that you finish this part and come. So the next week, I will show you how to start the MySQL server and then work on the relational model. Okay, so with that, we will finish for today. Thanks for joining in and also actively participating. So the plan for the next week is we are going to create some tables based on the things that we have discussed in the previous sessions. And then we will understand the basics of relational databases. Okay, and then after that we'll switch to MongoDB and we learn the basics, and then we learn the differences of these two types of databases. That's our first part of the course. Okay, thank you. Then we'll finish for today. Hope to meet you guys next week then.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.